build confidence in children instead of isolating them. A time-honored idea that, you know, if your kids don't behave the way you want them to, we isolate them. We send them through the rooms, or we say you can't play, or so on. And we do that with adults. If they behave in ways we don't like them, we send them off and isolate them. And the worst form of punishment is to isolate them for long periods of time. So a lot of people grew up with the idea that if your children didn't do what you like, you just say, go to your room and stay there for a certain period of time. And the idea was that they would be remorseful for what they've done and come back, and they would have corrected, you know, the problem which brought them to isolate them in the first place. There are two things that are not good about that. Number one is, nowadays there are a lot of extremely fun things in children's bedrooms, and so it's like sending them to their toys. And secondly, we have learned, and there's quite a bit of interesting research that's demonstrating that isolating kids doesn't teach them much that's positive. And they don't understand the impact of their behavior, especially young children, and they don't correct it either. They often will repeat, and we keep sending, and so on. So the alternative is to say, well, okay, well, what do we use then? Because there are sometimes when kids just are emotionally out of control, or they, you know, can't manage, and so on. And there are quite a variety of things. Now, I'm not going to recommend that you do this, but I'll give you an example. I was once asked to get involved with a mother and an 8-year-old boy sent by one of the schools, and he was a very bratty kid, and that's a generous understatement, and a big kid, and his mother was quite big, and so I gave her a few things to do to help out, and nothing seemed to work, and so I just gave her a direct approach, and I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get the school counselor and have her come home one evening, and I want you to get a sandwich and a book and a glass of milk, and I want you to lay this boy on the floor, and I'd like you to straddle him and sit on him. And she said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, you have your knees under you, so you're not going to hurt him. And then I want you to sit on him for at least 45 minutes, and quite frequently say to him, I'm your mother. I'm your mother. And eat your sandwich and read your book and drink your milk. And if he wants to go to the bathroom, he will. He'll say, don't let him go until he begs and begs. And then only if he agrees to come back and slide underneath you. And so the next time I saw him, his hair was combed and had a clean, fresh shirt. And his name was Billy. And I said, Billy, how are things going? He said, good. And I said, is your bed made today? And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, what will happen to you if it isn't made? And he said, gee, she'll sit on me. A very direct approach, see. And the point is that she had a method that was active and involved, and it involved her and the school counselor and him. Do you understand the difference? Instead of isolating him. So the alternative, see, is to say, okay, well, we want you to build confidence in your kids and to use misbehavior and so on. Now, there are certain kinds of emotional issues that you have to talk the kids down or hug them down, and a temporary respite where you say, okay, go sit down and then come back, all of that's okay. But what you really want is to build confidence on an active, proactive basis, and here's how you do that. Researchers have said, well, where does confidence come from? And a lot of people said, well, some kids have it and some kids don't. Well, it's probably true that some have less anxiety and some have more that we inherit, but it isn't true that confidence is all inherited. In fact, most of it is taught. So here's what you do to build confidence. Here's where it comes from. It comes from organized work, and a sense of achievement. And you just have kids get involved with that. So if they are misbehaving, we assume that they don't have a lot of confidence. One of the alternatives would be to come and help me. 2, confidence comes from high-quality relationships. Children who grow up in a family where there's love and happiness and warmth and conversation and so on tend to be much more confident than kids that grow up where there's a lot of punishment or a lot of isolation or so on. Third thing is that confidence comes from obedience. It comes from obedience to positive and appropriate rules, interestingly enough. And so obedience isn't mean conformity where you demand and control and force. Obedience is something that you work out with the kids the older they get, and sometimes you just have to tell them, this is what I want you to do, and don't do that, and so on. But you learn to say, I want you to do this very clearly, and teach them to engage in forms of behavior that you would like from them. And instead of saying, okay, this is the rule and we're going to punish you if you don't, you just keep asking them to engage in the form of behavior that you want. Fourth is that you teach them. And it's called you prepare them more than you punish them. And so when kids make a mistake, you say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to teach you to do something useful and constructive. So it requires more from us, and we'd like a vacation, and that's one of the reasons why we separate them. But if we bring them to us and sit them on a chair, for example, and say you have to stay there until you're ready to get off the chair, that's not bad. But mostly it's to use these opportunities to build confidence. And last, you build confidence by teaching kids to be really positive. We know it as a positive attitude. But the kids learn to be positive by watching their parents, by asking people to participate in positive things. So you set up a meal time once a week, for example, and you make a list of all the positive things that happened to people in your family that day. And you just write them down and say, oh, we had a lot of positive things, so that you teach kids to be optimistic as they go through life. That is a more effective way to create good discipline than it is to isolate your kids.